Before we begin the design panel, there's just a few quick announcements I need to make, and then we'll get right into it. If anyone has any questions throughout the weekend, they'll definitely be answered either by the registration desk right at the front where you checked in, or you can actually go to the FAQ page on the ProtoTO website, so prototo.ca, and we do have a screen set up in the middle there if you need it. You can also ask any of the organizers, so myself, Pam wants to wave back there. We have Kevin wants to wave. Alicia? Somewhere. Oh, tiny person at the back. All right, and Michelle and Matt from Board Again Games are here as well. They're can wave, okay. So they'll also be here to answer questions, and they'll be available to help anybody pick out games during the open gaming time. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Board Again Games, for letting us use this space for the event and for giving ProtoTO attendees access to their game library. A lot of these games are available for purchase, so if you find one you really enjoy, definitely talk to Michelle. Thank you to the sponsors, GameCrafter and Print and Play, for providing raffle prizes and prototyping material that the designers can use throughout the weekend. These materials can be found in the prototyping desk right at the front where you came in, and the supplies and tools are at your disposal. Designers have brought in a bunch of things as well. We'd like to thank everybody who donated prizes to the raffle. So everyone should have 2 identical tickets when you checked into the registration desk. All you have to do is rip one of the tickets and place it in the cup for the prize that you'd like to enter, and then keep the other ticket until the draw on Sunday evening starting at 8:15. Winners have to be present to claim their prizes. If you want to increase your chances of winning one of these great prizes, there's more raffle tickets available at the front desk if you're interested. Thank you to our partners Breakout Con and Wilfrid Laurier Games Design and Development Program. So Scott Nicholson, if you want to give a wave, there he is in the back. He is the coordinator of the program, and he's going to be around all weekend if you have any questions either about game design or about the Laurier program itself. Scott will be meeting with designers immediately following the panel tonight for office hours with Dr. Nicholson, and attendees are welcome to listen to any of the discussions. I want to thank everyone for being here, and we look forward to having a great weekend. You can clap again. Yeah. All right, so now I'm going to introduce our panelists. So I'd like to thank you all for being here tonight. We appreciate you taking the time to be part of this discussion. I'm going to be starting off with some questions that I've got already prepared for you, and I'll let you know if it's open or who it's targeted at. And then we're going to turn it over to you, the audience, at the end, so you can have your say as well. All right, here we go. So starting with Mr. Eric Lang. Eric has been designing table... That guy over... No, it's fine. Eric has been designing tabletop and digital games professionally for the last 17 years. He's worked on games based on amazing titles such as Star Wars, Marvel and DC Comics, Lord of the Rings, World of Warcraft, Game of Thrones, Warhammer, XCOM, Call of Cthulhu, it just keeps going, and many more. He's also designed many original theme games such as Arcadia Quest and Blood Rage, just to name a few, with several new original IPs currently in development. Next, we have Mr. Christopher Chung. All right.
All right, sir.
Sir. Chris is the designer of Lanterns The Harvest Festival, winner of the 2015 Mensa Select Award. Lanterns has also been nominated for the 2016 SXSW Tabletop Game of the Year, 2015 Golden Geek Family Board Game, and 2015 Dice Tower Gaming Awards Best Family Game. All right, then we can get some applause in there. Next, we have Mr. Daryl Andrews. Daryl is a full-time freelance board and card game designer and developer. Daryl's published designs and co-designs include The Walled City, Caffeine Rush, Fantasy Baseball, and Back to the Future Out of Time, with 20 additional games signed to be released. Also, Daryl is the co-host of Meeple Syrup Show. All right. Next, we have Mr. Paul Sang. Paul designed Outer Earth, a game of planetary exploration and development. So Paul actually studied graphic design at the Ontario College of Art and Design. Paul is currently a 9-to-5 designer, as well as an avid learner and entrepreneur by night. Let me give him a little round of applause. All right, next we have Miss Tanya Thompson. Tanya is the Director of Product Strategy and Inventor Relations at Marbles The Brain Store. For almost 10 years, she's traveled the world looking for the next big idea in toy and game industry for companies like ThinkFun and Mastermind Toys before going on to Marbles. She's an accomplished head of inventor relations and global acquisitions and has strong and far-reaching connections in the global inventor communities. So thank you, Tanya. All right. Last but not least, we have Mr. Kevin Nesbitt. Kevin is the co-founded Valley Games in 2006 with partners. During that time, he worked on several classic reprints, developed the economic game Container, and designed the second shipment expansion for Container, amongst other projects. Kevin left Valley Games in 2008, and in 2009, co-founded Stronghold Games, developing such games as Survive, Escape from Atlantis, and Crude the Oil Game. Kevin left Stronghold in 2012 and co-founded Mercury Games in the same year. So thank you everyone for coming. All right. So as I said, some of these are directed specifically at you. If it's going to be open, we'll say anyone can answer, and you're willing to jump in whenever you can, okay? So thought we'd start with the fun ones. A lot of people want to know, is this what you do for a living? Do you have another job? Or maybe where did you come from before you ended up here? So I'd like to ask each one of you, what was or is your day job? Well, let's go down the line. We'll start with Mr. Eric.
This.
What did you do before this?
This.
This, okay. He's only this. All right.
All right. I worked in the mutual fund industry and then left that to not design full time. Don't worry about it. I do want to get a job, so if anyone has leads, please. I have a resume too.
Always got the resume on.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. I'm doing this full time right now, but before I did odd jobs like working in a prison for young offenders. I ran drop-in centers, just a variety of jobs. Did sprinklers, systems, you name it, whatever.
I do graphic design, but also used to be a barista. I do freelance graphic design. I do graphic design for game publishers, so I've done a few graphic design gigs for AEG and some Kickstarter games. So it's, graphic design all around the board.
All the design, okay.
This is my day job. I have been in the industry for about 10 years. Before that, I was a high school math teacher. I actually live in Canada, but the majority of my career I've worked for American companies. I just work remotely, so I'm lucky enough to live in Canada, but a lot of my travel and whatnot is in Europe and in the US.
All right.
And for me, this is my full time. I've been that way for 11 or 12 years now.
All right. What did you do before this? Did you have something?
Well, the most interesting job before this, I worked at a funeral home for 6 years.
Okay. So very diverse backgrounds. All right. What made you change from playing games to wanting to design them? So I'm going to target this towards our designers. Why don't we start with Eric? What made you go from playing them to wanting to make them yourself?
I've been playing games since I was a little kid. My earliest memories of playing games was when I was like 7 or 8 years old. I used to play games with my grandmother in Germany, and they were all really bad. They were like really bad mass market games that I didn't like at the time, but I liked spending time with my grandmother, so I was tinkering with them even at the time to try to make them, what was in my opinion, more fun. So I added robots and dinosaurs, or I made them end, because a lot of these games don't really end. And so I feel like I've always been at least a tinker at some point. I don't know if I've really made a transition.
All right. So it sounds like you have a lot about home rules. What about you?
I dabbled a bit in poker in high school when it was getting big. So other than that, I had a few strategy games, but nothing really big until Catan hit me. And I didn't get the bug until I actually dreamt that I designed a game. I play tested with friends and family. They all loved it. I woke up the next morning and play tested whatever I could, and the game sucked. But having said that, I still continue to craft and still designing games.
All right. What was the switch for you?
Yeah, I loved playing games and going to gaming events and fairly recently, a friend of mine, Senfeng Lim, part of the Bamboozle Brothers, they've designed a bunch of games. I found out he had made one of my favorite games, Belfort, and so I tracked him down, and he invited me to start playtesting games with him, and did that for a while. Did not think I wanted to design games until actually a designer came by to show us their game, and it was just a huge binder of notes. And I remember at the end of it, after it was done, spending like hours listening to this game, and we kept encouraging, like, why don't we try it or play it or do something? After that, I was like, I think I could maybe do a little better job with that person, so maybe I'll try making a game. Then learned I wasn't very good, and learned on the way. So.
Who are you, Paul?
I actually started in the board game design field after Cards Against Humanity's tabletop deathmatch. So I saw it as a challenge that I wanted to push out a game within like 2 months or so. So I kind of like saw it as something that would challenge my design skills, but also like work on so many other different things than just design. So like mechanics and theme and all these things. But yeah, it just started after seeing a challenge that I wanted to take on. And
All right.
that's how I got.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're going to start getting a little bit more into design, and we're coming back to the publishers very soon, but we've got a lot of design questions here. I'm curious to hear from each of you about, do any of you work in design teams? So would any of you recommend working as a team maybe instead of being solo? So why don't we actually start with Paul this time?
Sure.
So Paul, have you ever worked in a team?
I usually do a lot of team-based things for graphic design, but I actually like doing it all myself for a board game because I know that I'm a jack of all trades. I love doing all the different things that actually make a game get published. So one-man team, I enjoy that.
Okay. So you're more of a soloer when it
Yes.
comes to your game design.
Yes,
Okay.
that I am.
All right. Daryl.
I'm kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
I'm not a jack of all trades at all. You do not want to see my graphics. But I love actually co-design. I try to co-design with as many different people as possible. You learn from those experiences. Each person kind of brings their own like tastes, and so whenever you design with someone else, you kind of create a new story. So I like that challenge, and I like new ideas, and so I think I have at least 7 different co-designers I've done games with. So
Sounds
so
about
far.
right.
So.
All right. So Chris.
So far, no co-designers. I am a lone wolf when it comes to designing, but if there's ever an opportunity to, I'll co-design. It's just that when I have an idea, I'm like, okay, I gotta see this all the way through. If someone wants to help me, sure, but then the game has to be, I don't like it anymore. Maybe you can help me at that point. But at the same time, it's like I do want to see the game until it's finally at the publisher's table.
All right, keep in your hands a little more. What about you, Eric?
I used to design almost entirely alone. In the last few years, I've been doing a lot more co-designs, and always with a single designer, so not so much on a team. During the day, I work on digital, so I do a trading card game, that's more of a team thing. I work with 3 or 4 other people. I definitely recommend it, especially in the digital field, because it's a little bit more data-driven, a little bit more metrics-driven. For co-design, I would definitely say, I highly recommend it. It is the myth is that it's easier. I don't think it is easier at all. I think it's actually harder because you have, especially if you have 2 people on the same wavelength, on the same level. You have 2 passionate people with 2 very diverse, interesting ideas that want to put something together that neither could come up with by themselves. So I think of it as it's something that you would do for the purpose of expanding your own horizons rather than saving time or energy.
Okay.
But definitely recommend it.
Okay, sounds good. I'm actually going to direct this question mostly at Paul, but I'd love to hear the opinions across the table after it. We're going to talk a little bit about self-publishing, just to get that question out there. Sure. I'll ask the table if you've ever considered self-publishing, but Paul actually has self-published. So can you tell us a tiny bit about self-publishing, and at what point do you think a designer would consider this themselves?
I think one thing that self-publishing forces you to do is to yet again wear a lot of hats, learn a lot of things about marketing, about actually playtesting your game properly, getting art for it, getting the rule book done. Like there are so many things that you need to get into the headspace of other than just designing the game. because publishers are great in all of those marketing aspects and getting assets, but if you want to self-publish, you actually need to see where the funding comes from, start reaching out to manufacturers, just see what the best quotes are, how many units, what kind of paper do you want, cardstock, components. It's just all of these things that aren't a part of designing the game suddenly comes up and they're important to you, because if you want to get funding on, for example, Kickstarter, where I got funding, you need to be on the ball. You need to make sure that everything is laid out and that people trust you, that you have a good sense of where this game is going to go. So knowledge and just understanding like how much you'll be taking on, because it's not easy.
It's a one-man team that does everything.
Yeah, it burns you alive.
I say, is there like maybe one thing you would want to say as a big watch out for anybody if they're considering this, or just a piece of advice?
I would say make sure to really reach out to friends and family and everyone when you actually launch or like do your release, because it's so easy to just launch your campaign and not be proactive after. So one thing that I learned after the fact was that you really need to like reach your whole network, like middle school friends, high school friends, teachers, playtesters, start that mailing list. Make sure that you actually have a following before you even press that button. It's all about the people that you know and the people that are actually on the lookout for this game that will be launching. So the following.
Thank you.
It's a question that gets asked a lot, like the conferences that I've spoken at, where it's like the first step, and vendors are like, do I self-publish or do I license? What is the, what's the benefits of both? And I find, because I've known inventors that decided to self-publish, and then if 5 years down the road, they'll come back and say, okay, we want to actually license this now. And the big difference in the change, why people switch, is because if you're going to be a self-publisher, you've got to, as Paul said, love every part of the business, not just the creation, but the manufacturing, the sales, do cold calls, get your game out there if you want it to live. So you have to really love the business aspect of it. And some inventors are just like, God, I don't want to do that. I just want to invent. I'm a creative person, and that's where I get joy, is from the invention. And so if that's the case, then you might decide that you want to license. The big difference is money. If you license a game, an average royalty is 5% of wholesale. So on a game that might sell $20 retail will be $10 wholesale, and you'll get 50 cents per game. Whereas if you self-publish, you get all the profits, but it also means you do all the work. So you have to decide where your heart lies and what you really want. Or is it the control or that sort of thing? So, but you want to, if you want to be that business person, you want to control it, then that's good. And if you put it on Kickstarter, well, that's a whole other conversation. But certainly, as companies, I've picked up games off Kickstarter where they've done a successful game, it's caught my eye, and then Kickstarter's great because I can send you a message and say, hey, I actually like that for our company. Would you consider licensing that? You can continue and fulfill your campaign, but in terms of like 5 years down the road, what's your plan? So.
Okay. All right, just for time, because we started a little late, I'm just going to skip a couple. This one's actually going to go across the board to both of you, because it'll be interesting to hear the different perspectives on this. Should designers tailor their games to publishers? So I would love to hear both sides of the table, what they think about this question. Why don't we actually start with the publishers, because we haven't heard from you guys a lot. Should designers be tailoring for your lines?
I think one of the most important questions we get asked is, what can I show you? What do you want to see? Do you want to see children's games? Do you want to see a high-end complex war game? And while it doesn't, most publishers will answer back saying, well, show me what you have, whatever it is. But I think really you need to understand what they've delivered previously, because my company's never delivered children's games. It's a very difficult market. So if someone shows us a children's game, it may be the greatest game ever, but I don't know how to bring that to market as well as the next company. So if you do your research ahead of time and take a look what the publisher's done in the past, and pitch them something that's not so far outside that league that they won't understand how to market it.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything, Tanya?
Yeah, sure. So when design what you love. First of all, don't tailor it to anybody. Design what you have the idea for and what you think is something that you really want to put your heart and soul into. The change is when you go to pitch it. So when you pitch it, absolutely research the person you're pitching it to, because it's a real waste of everyone's time. If you're pitching a real Euro strategy or, the kind of stuff that like Eric's worked on, that's like, let's sit down and play 5 hours around a board game. Or kill each other is not something you're going to pitch Marbles or even Think Fun or other company, Game Right, Mindware, Blue Orange. That's kind of the space that I'm in. So definitely know, and if you don't know who it is, then go into a game store and see what complements, where your game fits along with other games, and then look at who publishes that game and say, oh, I'd love to somehow connect with that company because I think they do something similar to what I've got on the table.
I think that's great advice, and we're going to talk a little bit more how to connect with publishers coming up. I want to open it just if any one of you designers would like to talk about, do you consciously tailor, or are you just moving ahead with your idea? How do we work?
I do.
Tailor?
Absolutely do. And I make simple games too.
Absolutely you do.
They're in there.
They're in there. I absolutely do. So this is not I wouldn't call this a piece of advice for like this, not starting out, but a big part of if you want to do this as a career rather than as I want to publish a game, those are two very, very different mindsets. If you want to do this as a career, you absolutely should have good relationships with your publishers. The deeper, the better. I have very, very deep relationships with the publishers that I work with, and so absolutely I do. When I think of something, I can't help but think, all right, this would be a perfect game for Space Cowboys or Cool Mini or Not, and it does affect my thinking because at the end of the day, of course, Tanya's right, 100%. You've got to do what you love. At least that's where the germ of the idea has to come from. That's where you got to start. But at the end of the day, if you want to get it published, there's a lot more hands that have to be in there, and the publishers are a very big part of that, and their tastes have to be part of the equation.
All right. Did anyone add anything, or would you like to keep going?
What he said.
What he said, okay. Airs it out. So we're actually going to get a little bit into the design process right now. So I thought I'd actually target this one at Daryl and Paul. How long does it normally take you to make an idea into a prototype, as Daryl's prototyping at the table right now? And how long do you think it should take? Daryl,
I'll go
go ahead.
I thought of this game last night, and I'm a big proponent of getting ideas out, physical, in front, try it, test it right away. So 3 o'clock in the morning, I was done writing the rules, and then this morning I printed out, and I'm, making it. I don't say that's the normative, or it is just a card game instead of maybe a more complex game. But I do like to work fast and try to get it created, get it in front of people, get playtest results, and then follow the fun. See what people are gravitating to, what's not working, what you thought was going to work, let it go if, kill your darlings if it's not working. And then also I'm a big proponent of doing multiple games at the same time. So if, you hit a wall, put that, on the back burner, let it simmer, and then start working on something else that you feel, motivation or creativity with. So for me, overall, the average time would vary from game type, and then even some games that should have been quick can be very slow, and then some games that look like they took a long time sometimes aren't. So.
What about you, Paul? What's your process?
I actually must agree with Daryl because it's that burst of inspiration sometimes that fuels you actually creating the prototype and actually making something solid to then playtest, because you can keep on spinning wheels for a long time, but you'll really miss the essence of the game, because initially you're like, oh my god, this is such a great idea, let's get it down on paper, and then you do it and maybe you're just like grinding away and like really chugging along. So jumping over to other designs or getting feedback from other people, getting it play tested right away, all of these are so important because you need to bounce ideas off people. You can't just slowly brew up something and expect it to be the most amazing thing ever. So quick, follow your inspiration like ASAP, make sure that you just prototype right away, like Daryl.
As he's doing right now.
I'll share a story I heard of. I had this opportunity to chat to one of my favorite games is Ticket to Ride, and Alan Moon was sharing about how he came up with that idea, and he said he was just walking down the river, and 90% of the game just hit him. Like he had figured out, okay, a map, like all the main details. Raced home, made it. He said, like, obviously that's like his best game go to. So he's always looking for that big inspiration moment. On the flip side, he says, because it was such a success, he has the luxury of never having to grind through and work through those other designs. Versus like all of us, where sometimes you might have a lot, but that last 10 or 20% can take a long time to work on.
Yeah.
So.
Well, kind of continuing down that line, I'm going to actually continue with Eric and Chris now. So when do you know when to abandon an idea or just rip it apart and rework it?
Sir?
Go ahead, sir.
Fine. Well, rookie mistake from my first ever game, that's the one where I'm referencing for my dream. That took a long time to me to consider ever killing it, because although I knew it was an okay game, I didn't want to let it go. There's some sort of like deep feeling that you want this game to succeed in the market. So that one took me about 6 months to finally playtest and kill, and I never looked back. Now I take a chainsaw to those ideas that I don't like at all. But I still have empty folders in my Dropbox to say, like, maybe I'll explore these ideas sometime soon, but if I don't have the willpower to actually prototype a game, I'll be like, okay, is this folder even worth considering keeping on my desktop? So.
Mm-hmm.
I throw away almost everything.
You do. It's just gone.
99% of everything I do is garbage.
Okay.
And so but I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and so I have several years of games and royalties to bank on. So I have the luxury to be able to do that. There was a period where I couldn't, where I had to pump out games and hit deadlines, and that was a necessity. But nowadays it's pretty much I have to love what I'm doing at all times, and I love every idea when I start off with it, but most of them usually by the time I get to prototyping it, I'll look at the prototype and be like, nah.
If you're not in love, it's gone.
Yeah, well, sometimes you have to build the prototype to go, oh, this is like 500 other games on my shelf.
Yep.
So there it goes. That's, again, I don't recommend that. That's a really depressing work ethic for a lot of people. Like, especially if you're just starting, just prototype everything, play everything. After a while, you'll be able to get a little bit more fussy with what you got.
You'll get an eye for it a little bit more. All right. I'm going to turn this over actually to Tanya and Kevin. I'd actually really like to hear more about your line. So what kind of games actually do fit your lines? Do you want to tell us a little bit about your lineups?
After you.
So Marbles it started as a retail chain across the U.S. So there's over 40 stores across the U.S., but we also do a private label, which is what I'm looking for, is to fill the pipeline for that private label. But then we also sell wholesale. So we have 4 games that just went into Target, for instance. I know Target wasn't successful here, but in the U.S. it's a pretty good business. So anyway, so it's actually very varied. So there's no, for instance, price cap. They'll do games as low as $10 and games as high as $60, $70. There's no particular medium. So they do wood, they do plastic, all sorts of different mediums, card games, etc. But basically what is really important is that it helps to build a better brain. So whatever the product is, it has to have the caveat that it will build a better brain, because marbles comes from don't lose your marbles, keep playing and keep your brain exercising. And that doesn't mean it has to be real cerebral or educational, because even a dexterity game can help build a better brain, kind of thing. So, and then the other thing is everything in a marbles store, it's very high design. A lot of companies, because they also sell other people's stuff, want to get into marbles because the volume that they sell is incredible. So everything is demonstrated in the stores, and they have brain coaches who are particularly passionate about everything that they sell. So most important for us is it has to demo extremely well. So it has to have some sort of sizzle or some sort of something that's going to grab the customer within the first 30 seconds. And if it takes you 5 minutes to actually learn the game, it's probably not right for marbles, because it has to be super simple. So think Spot It, for instance, versus a more complex trick-taking game like Teach You or something. So that's mainly the main thing, is keeping it simple. And but the sky's limit. We're in the same space as, say, a Game Right, a Mindware, a Think Fun, Educational Insights, that sort of kind of company.
Okay.
And we're actually in the more opposite end of the spectrum in some ways. We're more middleweight Euros is kind of where our lowest complexity, up to middleweight war games. For us, war games, if there's too many pieces, that becomes what you consider heavyweight, and those are tough to market even the best of times. So, but we found the space now for middleweight Euros is actually very, very crowded, overcrowded, maybe to a factor of 10. So we are actually pushing out some of our next products are pushing out in both directions. So towards a slightly lighter fare. Again, not something that you might find at a store where you want to be able to demo in 30 seconds or less, but still certainly lighter fare, but certainly more on the middle weight side than perhaps that previously spread.
So getting into a little bit about designers approaching you, so what should a designer have with them when they're pitching you a game? I ask both of you, Tanya and Kevin. What do you want? I guess what's the ideal for a designer to show up? They have what ready to go for you?
If it's a face-to-face meeting, they've got to have a 5-minute tell me why I should listen. I mean, we get pitched thousands of times a year, so I need a 5-minute succinct why is this game cool. After that, it'd be a rule set. Give me a tight rule set where I don't have to wonder what would happen here. I want a somewhat illustrated rule set that's the best work you can provide. And after that, if we're still interested, then I'll be asking for a prototype. So I have a prototype ready to go that's clean, easy to understand. I won't be scratching my head. The worst thing you can do is when I get back and I'm testing this with a group, if we come to a spot where nobody knows the answer to this question and the rules don't tell me, that's very, very frustrating, because you test thousands of games a year, so it has to be efficient and well designed for someone who's never seen your game before.
What about you, Tanya? What do you want them to show up with?
So if it's a connection that I've made and we are connecting via email, it might just be a pitch sheet. If you don't know what a pitch sheet is, I have a template I could share with you that most companies in the space that I'm in ask for. So it's basically not. It's actually very, very, very similar to Kevin. So it's a pitch sheet so that I can understand if it's right for me, and usually you can understand pretty quickly. And then maybe a rule set, and then if there's interest, then we ask for a prototype. But we need to see that I need to vet the game first, because there's no sense you shipping anything if we're not really that interested. That's mainly via email, and if it's at a toy fair, either New York or Nuremberg or Essen or ShyTag, or like an actual conference where we're meeting, Gen Con, then typically it's like a half an hour to an hour meeting, and you may start with pitch sheets, but a lot of times people will have a video. Oh, videos are always good. Video or a prototype that you would pull out on a table if I was interested in actually exploring it further. So, but the prototypes don't have to be elaborate or polished or whatever. I've been pitched on a napkin, and it's gone through. So it's all about the idea itself. But I would warn that first impressions are important. So if you're going to a bunch of publishers that you don't know and you're meeting for the first time, and you pull out the hand cut cards and everything else, that does leave an impression. They'll see through it, but at the same time, if nothing hits them, and then you're going to want to meet them again, but you didn't have anything that day that actually that they liked, then it just leaves an impression where somebody else pulls out a prototype that's just a beautiful board, or they 3D printed something. It just so I say don't mortgage your house or anything, because I have seen that also, which is sad. But definitely put your best foot forward.
That's perfect. Actually, that was our next question: is what state you'd want to see a prototype in. So I think that was a great explanation an answer.
Yeah, and if you know me, it's one thing. Then like I've already gotten to know you. It's more about that first impression. Or if you come with like you're Eric Lang, then like pitch me on a napkin.
There you go.
I don't
You got the
care.
napkin. She's talking about you, or isn't she? You're the napkin. How about a piece of paper?
Something. So if you're an established inventor, then it's pretty much fair game because I remember meeting Susan, who's the inventor of Quirkle, and I was like, oh my God, I love Quirkle. So show me what else you got. And it didn't matter what it was, what she was like putting on the table,
Nice.
kind of thing in terms of polish.
Kevin, would you say Tanya's kind of covered everything?
I would say so. Yeah, very good answer.
Perfect. So here's a really big one that I'm sure a lot of people in this audience would be wondering. What is the best method for a designer to approach a publisher? So let's say that we're not given the opportunity right now where you had a call for submissions. How do I put my stuff in front of you? How do I find you?
We get emails, cold emails, just dropped in our inbox every morning. I mean,
I'm not
15,
surprised.
20. And what bothers me is often you can tell they've carbon copied that to 100 different publishers. And so for me, that's an automatic delete. I just don't have time because then I have to weed through and decide, is this even reasonable for Mercury, or is it something that's a children's game, which we don't do. So I think the best way is, again, the pitch sheet, and then email me and tell me why I should, like within 2 sentences. This is a game that fits your line because here's a pitch sheet. Please get back to me if I'm interested. That's probably your best chance. Again, we get a dozen every single day. And then again, back to the previous advice, make sure it's for our company before you just email it to us, because it's signal versus noise, right? Publishers have to be very good at saying no. Otherwise, you'd have 1,000 games under license and all of them mixed quality. So tell me why I shouldn't just have it sent off with the other dozen that I received this morning.
Yeah. Why are you better than everybody else, right?
And then tell me, don't talk generically. Talk specifically 2 sentences at the start that tell me why I should open your pitch sheet, and then I will.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say too that like I've had a conversation with an inventor, and I'll be like when I worked at ThinkFun, I'll be like, so Rush Hour? And they'll be like, no, I've never heard of Rush Hour. And I'm like it almost pisses me off, because Rush Hour is ThinkFun, or at that time was like ThinkFun's like #1 game. So if I find that makes me feel like I'm a cold call, and I don't want to be a cold call. So and so just make sure that it's appropriate, for sure. Don't just go sending it out because you've got a contact. There's it varies in terms of who you can and cannot reach. So for instance, when I started 10 years ago, you couldn't reach Hasbro. I knew those guys, and they would send you immediately through an agent. There was a changeover, and now the new guys, like Dougal's, who'll be here, is Flight arrives soon. Like, he's more open to kind of like, but it's Hasbro. They're looking for a very specific type of thing, and like Pie Face. So it's kind of so you can't just walk into New York Toy Fair and expect to go talk to all the publishers, because they're there probably to sell. They're like, if they're like me, your schedule's packed well before you even hit the floor at Toy Fair. So it's really important to get their contact, to really kind of know who you're pitching, and then start a relationship, because in our role, relationship networking and kind of relationship building is what it's all about. So.
Okay. Did you want to add something here?
I do.
Okay.
So if I don't recommend cold calling publishers at all, like, period. It just, right now there are like 1,000 games coming out every single year. That's the published games from God knows how many established inventors and stuff. They get, as Kevin said, they get too many emails. My recommendation is, again, if you want to do this, it's a big difference if you want to do this, if you have a game that you like that you want to see published, or if you want to do this as a career. If you want to publish more than one game, if you see yourself doing this as a thing, go do the groundwork yourself. Build yourself a fan base. Build yourself a reputation. Go to conventions with your game. They have prototype alleys. They have events like this. Get your game refined. Get people. Go to sites like BoardGameGeek.com, stuff like that. get people talking about your game, build up a demand for it, ground up. Publishers notice. Publishers read all the same sites that we read. They go to all the same conventions we go to. And absolutely, if a publisher sees there are people already asking about this game and they're already excited about it, then they're going to get excited too. And you're automatically got a foot in the door. And that puts you at least in the top 0.1% of the 1,000 other emails that they're getting.
I think that's great advice. And we're going to get a little bit about conventions and the different purposes of different ones in shortly. I thought I would talk about something that I think the audience would be curious about, maybe doesn't know a lot themselves. So we'll start with the publishers and then we'll go to designers. Just a little bit about contracts. We're not going to talk about anything specific. I don't want to hear anything too specific or financial or anything like that. But we'll start with the publishers. What typically would go into a contract for a designer? What should they expect to see if you said, oh, I love your game, we'd love to sign you, this is what it's going to look like?
I would say it depends from product to product. I think as was stated before, you should be looking at about 5%. Some companies do it at wholesale. Our particular company does it out of retail, what we actually receive. I think it's important to understand what's going to happen to your game, and if you're so in love with your game that you can't tolerate changes, then you need to have that spelled out in the contract and be prepared for the publisher to run away. I don't think I've ever seen a game that I've ever worked on go straight from design to publication without some input from the publisher, even from top end designers, and it's just a matter of tailoring or preference. So be sure you understand who's going to own your game after a set period of time, and who's going to own the changes to your game. That's a big one. Often you'll be forced to give up all the changes too. So when your game comes back, you're not allowed to use the publisher changes, and that's fairly standard. And it makes sense that the publisher's going to spend years developing your game, then they do own those changes. I think those are the big ones I'd be looking for as a designer.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's also, so you said royalty, that's the major one. Territory. So where are you giving the publisher territory? If they're just a Canadian company, you don't necessarily need to give them worldwide rights if you have connections yourself in other territories. So you want to be careful about what territory you're giving away. What minimums the publisher needs to reach. Sometimes it's a value, like a dollar amount. Sometimes it's a unit amount. It depends on the publisher. And so you want to be careful that when you give it to them, that there's some sort of minimum that everybody's happy with. That if they only reach that minimum, you'd still be happy to have the game with them. There's also termination. So what are the conditions to terminate the contract? Is that they haven't reached the minimum. You can even do things like, hey, look, I actually have a friend in Germany. You're only a US company. You don't sell in Germany, so I'll give you 2 years to actually publish in Germany, and then I might want rights back to certain territories if that's... and basically, anything can be written in. And then advances. So if we sign your idea, then we may give you an advance which is different than an option. An option just takes it off the table and you can't show it to anyone else until we decide if we're really going to go forward. And it just pays you for that time that you've taken it off the table. Where an advance is usually a portion of what you think your first year royalty will be, and then it goes against your royalty. So for instance, if my advance is $2,000, or your advance is $2,000, and then your first year of royalties is like $5,000, then that $2,000 goes towards that $5,000. So that's an advance, and basically you should be willing to give up everything. So I, as a publisher, know my market and I know who I'm trying to target. So I want the ability to change it to best fit our company and best fit our market. So if you're like, oh my God, it has to be called this. It has to be called this. It's named after my son or something like that. You need to give that up because that could be a deal breaker. We typically want everything to be able to move forward with how we best see. And it's not because we want to be controlling, it's because we best know our market and we feel we're only going to move it forward where we think it's going to be most successful. And if we've got an inventor blocking or wanting to block the way, then it obviously doesn't work. And so, but at the same time, like I know us as a company, we'll work with you. We're not like going to just drop you and then like leave you in the dark. You are the person who thought of this game and are most passionate about it. So if we're going to change a rule or if we're going to do something, there's a lot of communication along the way. It's not like we're big and nasty, but we just need control into knowing how to move it forward for us.
All right. So half of contracts is also the designers. So what I thought I'd turn over to you guys, again, without too many specifics, we're not getting into financials, anything like that, just things that maybe first-timers wouldn't think to ask about contracts, or even, for example, do any of you put into your contracts things like you can buy your game at production costs instead of retail, or things that, again, if we've never seen a contract before, never would even think to ask? Is there anything standard that you guys tend to ask for?
Most publishers
Over
have
there?
Most publishers have a boilerplate. And any publisher that I would want to work with has a boilerplate. So I would just look at that, and if you really need to, have your lawyer look at it as well. You might probably want to ask them about what they want to put in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more about what you don't want to put in.
Okay.
This happens every panel. I have to make sure to say it every panel. But sweet God in heaven, do not ask a publisher to sign an NDA. You don't need to protect your idea from a publisher. Nobody's going to steal your ideas. Nobody.
I was gonna say, and they're not that ironclad anyway, so you're not getting very far with that.
To be frank, no idea is worth it. If you show a publisher a prototype, there is a good to fair chance that they or somebody they know in the industry is working on something already like that.
Mm-hmm.
They may turn it back to you and say, we're already working on something like that. There's a good to fair chance that somebody will release a game sort of similar in the future. That is not them stealing. That's our industry is too small for that.
Mm-hmm.
Designers talk. Everybody has, it's reputation based. I think in my entire career of 17 years, maybe 2 people that I've ever heard of have tried to steal an idea from somebody, and nobody works with them anymore. They're both out of the industry.
So it'll be called out pretty quick, yeah.
Just trust is two-way street. Trust that the publisher does have your best interest in mind, because yours and theirs are conjoined.
Okay.
I love that that comes from a designer. That's how we can tell the difference between a professional and amateur, is when they pull out their NDA and say, will you sign this? And I will absolutely not.
No.
But to be aware that publishers have NDAs that you have to sign in order to show the idea. So I'm afraid it's not a two-way street, but you won't get out of into a pitch meeting without, sometimes with some companies, signing some sort of legal with them.
Do we want to go into the last 3? What would you like to add to a contract? Or you ever add something to a contract?
Yeah, I was just going to point out some of the fun stuff that's in there, like anything from asking for your name to be on the front of the box. That's a nice thing to clarify. Mm-hmm. Things like getting a few free copies or reviewer copies, being able to buy them at wholesale. You're not going to make royalties off of the ones you're buying at wholesale. But
You pay yourself back.
But you got a deal. You can give those to family members for Christmas, cheap gifts, and stuff like that. So there's some fun stuff that you get, you learn along the way, and yeah.
All right. You want to add something, Paul?
Or you can self-publish.
Or you can self-publish, and then no contract
All the
problems.
perks.
Just distribution problems, right?
Sign your own contract.
Yeah.
There you go.
Did you sign an NDA?
You're the licensee and the licensor.
There you go. You can wear all the hats at once. So we're going to get into a little bit about conventions and the industry in general, because we're starting to get very close to our open discussion times. And we thought we'd just talk a little bit about what conventions are worth going to first. So just hearing from you guys, because most of you are very experienced with the convention circuit, which conventions are good for pitching ideas, and which ones do you think you're heading more for the testing and feedback, or just maybe more for getting into the community rather than necessarily talking to publishers? Which ones would you sort of say to go to, depending on what you're looking for? Do we want to start? Why don't we start? We can start with Kevin and come all the way back around again.
I actually have stopped going on conventions for the past 2 years, a couple, but I find the returns to scale for publishers has decreased year after year after year. There's a lot more noise, a lot less signal. That being said, I would suspect any convention in which you are staying in the same hotel as the publisher, that's a really good chance to shake hands, say, hey, can I maybe after supper show you something? Because often there's not a very strict schedule. Maybe if I've got 20 minutes later, I'll say, hey, let's meet later. So I would say that would be for me the first place target, an overnight convention where you know you're staying in the same place that the publisher probably is too.
Okay. Well, that's good advice.
Interesting. Okay. I didn't know that that is what people
A
can
lot
do.
of deals done.
Tanya's
after midnight.
making notes as we
Yeah.
go.
What if I stay at an Airbnb? The conventions that I typically know and a lot of my inventor relations friends go to is, and then of course, like keep in mind the company that I'm representing. New York Toy Fair is a big one. ShyTag, which is the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, is another really big one. If you're looking for the companies like I mentioned before, like if you're looking for the Euro strategy type of companies, then may not necessarily be where you're going. Nuremberg Toy Fair, which is the largest toy fair in the world, it's in Nuremberg, Germany. That's one if you're looking at international business. Essen Game Fair, if you're a gamer, you want to go there anyway because it's like the Mecca. But it's also a place where I go and take appointments in terms. Another one, but God, I don't know. Alan might like kill me if I said it. But the Gathering of Friends is another great place because.
Except for none of us can go.
Invite only.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right. So get an invitation.
Get an invitation to the most exclusive party there is in gaming, and then you'll be fine.
Right. Okay, so there's that. But anyway, so those are some of the main ones. And now that I'm in Marbles, what's that? So yes, BGG-Con for sure. Especially, and I think you guys will have because you're kind of
I'm seeing some lists saying
designing, in a different space. Gen Con, Origins. I'll be interested to hear what your guys' list is.
Mainly Tanya posted all of them, but for the Designer Central one, it's definitely Pub in Baltimore, what Eric is sporting.
that. He's already advertising.
There's a couple there in the
Special
US.
gifts?
There's also ProtoSpiel, which is mainly Ann Arbor. And what else? There's also
ProtoTO.
ProtoTO.
There you go.
And these-
Always go for the easy applause.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on.
Go shout out to Toronto. That's
yeah.
easy.
Oh yeah.
The two conventions I'm going to recommend. This is for people who are making strategy games. If you're strategy, be it family games or heavier end, I obviously look for local cons, but the ones I would travel to are BGG Con and Dice Tower Con. Those are actually two of my favorite shows. BGG Con is in Dallas, Texas. It's actually at DFW Airport. It has about 3,500 people. It's in one hotel. It is the greatest concentration of tastemaker gamers in the industry. So I would maybe spend 1 year, just bring your game to play with other high-end gamers and get them talking about it like I was going before. If you want to make a name for yourself, be successful at a con like that. Dice Tower Con is like that. It's an up-and-coming con. It's about 1,500 people, but it's going to be 3,000 people next year, 5,000 people in the year afterward. And it's in Orlando, Florida, so you get to swim with dolphins too, which is pretty awesome.
Go to Disney World.
It's called Dice Tower Con, which is, by the way, run by the Dice Tower Network, which is one of the most prominent reviewers in the industry. If you don't know what that is, just Google Dice Tower. The Dice Tower and read the reviews. That gives you a really good idea of what the pulse of this industry on the hobby game side.
Do you want to add? Jen?
Yeah, I was just going to add a couple others. Origins, just Columbus, Ohio. It's not too far of a drive. And great access. It's a little before Gen Con, and it's not too big, so you actually get access to publishers. So that's really great that you can actually have the time and their hours aren't too late for the exhibitor halls. In general, just a tip when you're going to conventions, remember that the publishers are working long hours on the exhibitor hall floors. So you have small windows of opportunity either during the hours of the exhibitor hall or after hours. And so because there's so few hours, you want to schedule as much in advance as possible so that it's worth your while and it's worth their while. So just try to honor that and make sure you show up on time, even early, for each of those appointments, because the last thing you want to do is they carved out that time to meet with you and you show up late. So just a couple tips when it comes to conventions. So Origins. The other one And I'm surprised it didn't actually, like, we didn't talk about it, is Gen Con, which just happened, which is like the mega one for North America and actually passed Essen for total attendance. And it's kind of you have to go there at some point. So at some point in your life, if you want to make games, you got to go to Gen Con. It's chaos, and yet there's everyone there. So if there's someone you want to talk to, they're going to be there.
All right. This is just going to be our last question, just kind of talking about the industry in general. Where do you see the industry, how do you see the industry changing in the next few years, particularly the Canadian market? So I'd be curious to see what you guys think is maybe coming down the pipes, or maybe how things are changing. Again, it's speculative, so whatever you'd like to say. Eric looks like he wants to say something.
I was looking over there. I think we're going to grow more superstars.
There you go.
And Eric already has like 10 games scheduled for the next 3-4 years, so you just buy all of Eric's games.
He's the prolific one. I don't know. I mean, the Canadian market is really interesting. So they, one of our biggest distributors here, which is Philosophia, now known as F2Z, which were based in Quebec. They were this quietly ginormous company. They just got sold to Asmodee, which is the big French behemoth that's coming to eat us all.
Swelling up
In the good
everybody.
way, by the way. I for one, welcome our new French overlords.
There you go.
But
Make Asmodee great.
but so there is going to be a lot of consolidation, and because of that acquisition, I think that Canada is actually. Our market is actually going to be a bigger part of the global marketplace. For once, we're going to get some respect.
Oh my God, yeah.
So I think I think we're going to see some, besides like awesome talent, we're going to see a lot more networked events. And like, not to go for more cheap applause, but like you guys, we've never had a proto spiel here before, and shows like this are going to be a big part of networking us, bring us together. So I think we'll be like the next New York. Who knows?
Oh, that'd be awesome. We'll say
Better
anything
food.
left to add, then we're going to open up to the audience. So if there's anything else about Canadian market or
Well, so the trends that I see as in vendor relations, you're always trying to be like ahead of the trends versus being on trend, because we're developing games 18 months out of the time that they're publishing. So one thing for sure is that the sad thing, there isn't really a common name for it, but Euro strategy, hobby games, tabletop, whatever you want to call that. So the gateway games like Catan and then further on are really they're not quite mainstream, but they're definitely coming out of the basement, and that's why we see these big mergers like Asmodee is becoming this big behemoth. Don't discount either Spin Master right here out of Toronto, which is also doing a ton of acquisitions. So there's like this real kind of growth that's happening with this type of game becoming more and more popular. Even though we're in the industry, we think it's already so popular, but if you go out there and talk to just an average person, they may not know of what you speak when you talk about tabletop games and things like that. I think also technology I've been waiting for it for a very long time. Whether it's and obviously with Pokemon Go, which is just amazing to watch. But that kind of AR capability. So it's like, and then, maybe that's going to supplant like where virtual reality is going and things like that. But we've never with board games been able to do it well, right? Like we all remember those those app games when Hasbro did Game of Life with your iPad, and then it's a spinner, but oh my God, who wants to do that? So we haven't quite figured that out yet, but I think it's coming. So. Yeah,
Eric's gonna add?
It's starting.
Yeah.
XCOM.
Yeah, well, that's what Eric says that's where he's heading,
No,
right?
it's definitely. But I'm just saying in terms of like, I think it's really going to make a difference in the next little while.
All right. So we're going to open up to all of you guys now. Is there anyone who has a question ready that they'd like to ask? So I'm going to be passing this around as we go. I'll start over here. I'll pass that to you.
So I have a question for the developers. You said that you get thousands of games and that you filter through them And when someone comes to you with an idea, it virtually always gets tuned and tweaked as you develop it. My question is, that sounds like an awesome job, being a developer and taking good ideas and making them awesome. How do you get into that? Or how do you find guys for people? Or what does that process look like, turning a good idea into a great finished product?
That's a good question. I'll grab it if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's sometimes a thankless job and tiring. I don't know any medium to small sized company that would hire for pay a developing team. I think anyone who's in the industry who is their own publisher is going to want to take that under their wing because they know what they want. Often it results in you play the game with your trusted group. You say, well, give me a what you like and what you don't like, and then you see if that matches your own. If you're getting a consistent feedback of we don't like this from your testing groups, and you feel the same way, then that's the first thing that gets cut or changed. The product you're trying to build, sadly, is the first priority is one that will sell. And the second priority is one that's good, and that's. I mean, if you reverse those, you may or may not be in business any longer. So sometimes good mechanics go by the wayside in order to get a product that will sell, and that's the reality. So part of that is why we tell designers be prepared for changes because they do happen. But like a lot of publishers. We're not here to ruin people's designs either, right? It often becomes a negotiation, even if it's a bit one-sided. We say, here's what we're thinking about changing. The designer says, well, if you're going to change that, maybe have you considered this? And it becomes a kind of a two-way street, with the goal being a product that you can sell. Because printing is expensive, and if you consistently bring products to the market that are great but don't sell, that's a great way to have a lot of inventory sitting around that people aren't buying.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, so I was going to say that, so working for bigger companies, so as a teacher, I use games and puzzles, and then I started speaking at conferences, and then I met the CEO of Think Fun, and then he hired me, and I left the classroom, which was a big deal, because in Ontario, teaching is a good gig. But then suddenly I got to suddenly I was getting paid to solve puzzles all day. And now I get, paid well to travel and meet really amazing people. I'm a big gamer myself. So to meet Rainer Knizia and Mr. Teuber and all these people, it's like a dream job, no question. So, but I'm not saying go get a teaching degree and then go from there. So what I would say is, if you're really passionate about it, I'm very lucky because I live 2 hours north of here and work, but a lot of the times it may require a move. So if you're really, really, you got to look locally, obviously, if you want to stay local. But it's about networking and getting to know people. So I know people who just love games, and so they start by being a demonstrator at one of these cons, right? And they go in and they work, and then suddenly they get to know Mr. Asmodee or whoever, and then maybe if they show real skill and talent with games, then suddenly there's some sort of opening. It's like who you know, so it's like getting to know people is really important. If you don't have the ability to travel, another way to get known is by doing things and Nicole could speak to this, writing blogs, becoming an expert in the field. We watch, as Eric said, we watch and we read, and we're also part of that community. So I imagine if Tom Vassell wanted to go work for a game company, he probably could, So it's kind of getting known, and then just if you're blogging or anything, just certainly be passionate about whatever the angle that you want to blog or vlog or whatever about. But definitely you got to start somewhere. So good developers, most of the companies I've worked on have a developing team. And so right now we're looking for an industrial designer. We'll be looking for a graphic designer. We're looking for a product development manager. There's always places out there. Even shytag.com has a job board on it. So I know right now Play Monster's on there. They used to be Patch. These are more mainstream companies that can hire that sort of thing. But that's what I would advise. Don't, if you really want to do it, you should go do it, because it can, and Daryl, you can talk also, and Nicole, the guys here that are real big gamers. It's not easy, but certainly there are people out there that started as gamers.
Yeah, I was just going to add a couple things. There is freelance opportunities for development work as you build relationships with some of the medium to larger companies. So that's an opportunity, especially if they have worked with you before or you've done design. So that's an opportunity to really, long-term hope for. Another thing already mentioned was like the volunteering and getting involved in little ways, rule writing, things like that, where that at least establishes like a connection so that when the opportunities come up, you're on the radar. I'll give a plug for Chevy Dodd has a video that he just put out answering this question of how do I get a job in the industry, and it's a little tongue-in-cheek because the majority of it, spoiler, is he says your best chance is if you start your own company, but he does also talk through like ways to get involved and opportunities like himself, and he's with Portal Games, so someone just to kind of keep an eye on.
Thank you.
Another question?
So I guess just getting into the design game, for lack of a better word, one of the things I find myself most conflicted with is often like the most innocuous comment or like thing that I see, I'll be like, oh man, I could turn that into a game. Like, that's really interesting. But it's not really like the game that I'm currently working on. Like, it's so, like, I might be working on a strategy game now. This is a party game. And like, is it recommended that like a person kind of focus more on like one thing than just spread all over the board? Like, I make games for every kind of, you know what I mean? Because not so much tailoring to publishers, but tailoring just to my own brand, you know what I mean?
This one, it's so simple.
Yeah, say already.
Do what you love, always.
Yeah.
If that changes, do the other thing. But just make sure you're always working on your best idea all the time. And that, as long as that's your constant, you're going to succeed somehow.
Yeah, I give a mention to the Bamboozle brothers, Jay Corbin and Several Lim. They say they have a game for each market. It doesn't matter what publisher reaches out for them, but they always have something to go along, like maybe a party game or maybe a strategy game whatsoever. For me, it's what Eric said. Whatever I like doing in the moment, I'll focus 110% on it. And for games that I can put to the side, I will for foreseeable amount of time.
Yeah, I would say work on everything. Like when I go to a convention, I pull luggage, and it's all different prototypes. So, and that's just because the bag on the shoulder just got too heavy. So,
That's how we know where the designers are, because you're all carting suitcases behind you. There's a designer. Yeah, for sure. I see inventors who do the whole gamut, and they're not necessarily showing me everything because not everything is right for me, but I know that they do. And so like Jay and Sen are a good example. They pitch to me, even though they do Balfour and other, but they're also great puzzlers and things like that. So, and if I'm like looking for a particular thing, like let's say we're now looking for a party game because party games are fun, and I know you have I've worked with you, and you have a kind of mind that I think might be a good party game that would suit us. And I know you do a variety of things. Then it'd be like, hey, like, do you have a party game in that library of yours, kind of thing? So.
I often get asked this question a lot, and the best answer I can come up with is think like a comedian. And a comedian will never sit down and write a set of jokes. They'll never say, I got to write a new set. They write jokes. And then they take the best and they make it into a set. And I think game design is a lot the same way. If you have an idea, write it down. And I mean, literally write it down. A good comedian will always have pen and pencil, a pencil and paper nearby. So write it down, get those jokes, and then pick and choose. Make yourself a set from that. So you have 100 ideas, you make it whittled down to 2, but there'll be 2 that's the cream rising to the top, right?
We'll go follow them.
Like, what is taking up your headspace right now? So if you can't think about the strategy game right now, make the party game.
Yeah.
Like, if your headspace is in the party game, get it out, get it on paper, go back to the strategy game. Like, it doesn't have to be your one and only baby all the time. Like, free your mind up a bit. Like, you don't want to work on the strategy game and be like, oh, but that party hat is so amazing for this game, and then you're not focusing on the strategy game anymore. It's like, put in the effort into whatever your head is thinking about and just get it out on paper. Yeah.
Next question.
Hello? Is it worth incorporating? And if you have a name, should you trademark it, or what are your opinions about that?
Incorporating.
As a designer, like say,
Oh,
if I
sweet
go
God of
for,
heaven, no.
no,
Nope.
Yeah. When you're talking as a designer to a publisher, you're licensing your game to them. It's so hard to say, oh, I'm my own company. Are you taking my game as part of my company or taking my game as part of Christopher Chong? It doesn't work. No, easy as that. So definitely, I would, if you're not planning to self-publish, don't try to incorporate.
I am planning to self-publish.
Okay, then-
so
Then that's a different
Yeah,
thing.
that's a different.
Did
yeah.
he say incorporate or trademark? What did you say?
incorporating for liabilities, but also the name should be trademark the name.
I did not trademark my name. If someone takes out Earth, good luck. Like they're gonna try to, I guess, make a game. Yeah,
I'm gonna do that right now.
but it's about being first to the market. And if you already have something that has been prototyped, you've already manufactured it, you're already doing all these things. If someone just swoops in and steals the name, it's just not gonna have any clout, you know. So as long as you have, and they can't sue you or anything because you can already see a backlog of you've been working on this for a while. You already have blog posts, you know, talk about that. You've been playtesting, so.
You hear all those horror stories of like EA or like those big AAA companies reaching out down to those indie developers, say, hey, we already had a game out there with this name. You can't use that name anymore. And they have the lawyers to prove it. So I'm like, okay, that's a different story. Whereas this is a tight-knit group. A lot of us know each other. We know what games are we're making, whether we blog about it or whether we share it on different sites. So the amount of research that goes into thinking about a name that's good for a game, you'll go to BGG, you'll go to review sites. Is this game already taken? No? Good, we'll work on it. If it happens to be on it, we'll pivot because we're such a nice industry.
And names can change, you know, like a game is the mechanic, the theme, it's not just the name. So yet again, make a good game, and publishers would even like want to reskin it, you know, so maybe it's not even Diamond Rush anymore, it's like just Fabric Haven or whatever, you know, it's like, it's just,
Thanks.
All right, I think we have time for one more. I think that's
It's got to be good.
Yeah, it was Trove. It was Trove.
This is topical for this weekend. So when you play test, you're going to get tons of feedback. How do you decide what's good feedback and what you should just ignore?
Good question.
Oh boy. So playtesting is I run several panels at conventions and like 2-hour panels, and playtesting is the entire topic. How to sum that up in 140 characters or less. So like ideas, 90% of playtest feedback is useless, but just like 90% of your own ideas are useless, but the 10% matter. So at the end of the day, it's your game. When I say useless, 90% of playtest feedback can be easily boiled down to, I wish you were making this game instead of the game you're already making. And that's fine, that's subjective, but it's your game, you own the game, you have to make the game that you want to make. So the only feedback that is absolutely objective, that you have to take no matter what, is your math is wrong, it doesn't work, there's something objectively provably wrong about your game. Everything else, you have to basically use your gut and build experience over time.
I guess the one exception I would add maybe to that would be if a publisher says, I'm interested, I would sign this game if. Maybe bend your own personal rules a bit, maybe not permanently, but in a way that you can come back a couple weeks later and say, okay, I've worked on it. Now let's put pen to paper. Maybe that's the one time you might want to bend your own rules a little bit just to make sure. I mean, if you're especially for a first-time designer, if you're getting that kind of interest of I'm interested if, maybe think about making that change.
I'd say a major thing when playtesting is actually just observe the players. I mean, feedback's great, but you can watch people and read between the lines. So, are people engaged? Are people leaning in? Are they leaning back? Are they checking their phone? Are they arguing with you because they're actually engaged and they care about the game? Are they just throwing out ideas because they want to fill dead air? So, most of the time you can probably learn a lot just by watching people play your game.
Yeah, and it's nice that you actually even asked, because I definitely see games where the inventor has done no playtesting, or the common like horrible rookie mistake is like, oh my God, my grandkids played this and they loved it, or my family played this and they love it. Well, of course they love it because they love you. They're not going to give you bad, we hate it. So make sure you playtest with people you don't know.
I trained my family to hate my stuff, by the way.
Yeah.
Work on that.
Yeah, what's my
Very
family
useful.
like?
It's all about recurring themes and feedback. Like if a lot of people are having fun, it's a fun game, Like you can't just take one advice and change your whole game around it. So playtest a lot, playtest often, make sure that you can make changes on the fly. Like if someone just wants a small change in this and that, have sticker paper and just put it on and like move along. Like they'll be happy playtesting it at that point, but you know that for yourself, you're looking long term. Like you just want to see what people are getting out of this playtest, like what you will be getting out of this playtest. It's not always positive, you'll be going through a lot of them, and just be adaptive and like don't be so critical on the playtesters because they just want to play something and they're just playing like scraps of paper that you put together the day of, it's just
Leave them.
that skill, but just
So we're in a last minute, just as a heads up. Sorry, guys.
Chris? Definitely sifting through the weeds is kind of a hard part. And getting into the game artisans in Canada, one of the criticisms that I actually had against me was I don't provide too much feedback. And I was like, okay, if I don't deliver hard feedback, maybe they won't deliver hard feedback on my games. But as I got more interconnected with these guys, now I can dish out the hard stuff and I'd be comfortable with getting the hard stuff back to me. So.
Oh yeah.
Eric's like, I'll rip it up.
I eviscerate his stuff all the time. If people are digging into your game, and especially, and you can tell when you've aroused somebody's passion, if they're getting in it with you, you know that you've got something, and it's better at the end of the day. If I believe it on a note, you'd much rather make a game that 10,000 people love than a game that 1 million people shrug their shoulders at, because they're not going to buy that. Nobody's going to publish that. At least they shouldn't.
All right, well, I've lost my microphone, so I'll just talk louder. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you guys for answering all these questions and doing such an amazing job at it. I'm sure a lot of people took some very, very valuable information from what they heard here. And we're now on to playing some games. So thank you guys, and let's have some fun.